Hey everyone, welcome back to another Node program tutorial. Today I want to cover MySQL and how to integrate it with Node and React. If you watch my previous project, you'll see that I programmed with Node, React, and I used MongoDB. Well, a lot of people are still using SQL queries, and so today I want to show you how to set all of that up using MySQL, using Node, and I'll use my previous project so that we can move faster with this. So look back on that. You can check out my GitHub to get that project. And I'll show you right now. Let's get right into this. If you would like to follow along, you can visit my GitHub right here at github.com/coderkai. And you can go to my repository and find the Node React MongoDB tutorial because I'll be using this one and modifying it with my MySQL database connection in it. Right here, I created a folder called Node MySQL app. And all I did was copy my previous project, the React MongoDB app, which is the same from GitHub. So I have Visual Studio Code open, and so now I'm going to drag this into Visual Studio Code. And then let's open up the terminal with Control-tilde. Now I'm going to run a few commands using Homebrew to install MySQL. Since I am running a Mac OS Mojave, I'm going to install MySQL 5.7 for me. So how to do that? I'm going to type brew install MySQL at 5.7. So that's the version I'm going to install for mine because I'm running Mojave and it looks like the stable MySQL version for me is 5.7. Now you can try to do brew install MySQL and see if that works for your operating system. I've already installed it. So now afterwards, I need to run brew link -- force MySQL version 5.7. And then the final command, I have to run brew services start MySQL. And I'm running version 5.7. So that's how you start up MySQL. There's one final optional command called MySQL secure installation. Now this, if you run this command, it will ask you to set up a password for your MySQL database. I'm not going to set up a password for mine, but you can run that if you would like. The MySQL databases that you install on your Mac OS, most of it has a username of root and it does not have a password. So that's what I'm going to use for mine. Here are a couple of other commands. In case your MySQL isn't working, you can also try brew services restart MySQL. And I'm running version 5.7, so I'll say restart MySQL at 5.7, and that's only if you're having issues with it. Now once you run the MySQL start, it will always run even after you restart your MacBook, so you don't have to worry about it after that. You start it up and MySQL will always run. So now we need something to interact with the MySQL database. What I like to use is this right here. You can go to mysql.com and you will see that they have something called Workbench. Now it's right here. You can click on download. Since I am running Mac OS Mojave, my version that I can install that will work for my operating system, I have to go to the archives and I installed version 8.0.18 right here because you'll see right here it says this one is compatible with Mojave for me. If I go to the next higher version right here, it starts supporting Catalina and higher. So mine is capped off at 8.0.18. But if you're not sure, go ahead and just download the latest version, install it, and you can always install another version over it if it doesn't work for you. So here is MySQL Workbench, and I'm going to step through on setting up a database, tables, and making our connection. So the first thing you'll want to do is click on this plus sign right here and create a database connection. You can leave all of these right here. Like I said, the username is root and there's no password, but if you did create a password, go ahead and click on right here and enter in your password. Now, after you've set this up, go ahead and click on test connection and you'll see right here that I've successfully made a connection to my MySQL database. So if it didn't make a connection for you, try to figure out why it didn't, and it's usually because you didn't install the MySQL correctly, you don't have the correct version, or it's the username and password combination. After I've set that up, I'm going to click on this right here and it made a connection. And for me, it shows this system schema right here. I'm not going to use this schema. I'm going to create my own schema. And if you remember our previous project with MongoDB, I created a Twitter clone database. So I'm going to do the same thing. What you can do is right click on this window right here and it says create schema. I'm going to call this node underscore Twitter clone. This is exactly like the MongoDB schema that I created. And I'm going to apply this right here, close it up. And you'll notice right here, it created the node Twitter clone schema. Next up, I need to create some tables for this. So I'm going to right click on this table here and say create table. I'm going to create two tables, one called users. And in users here, it says click to edit. So right here, I need an ID. And this is a primary key. And I want it to auto increment. Right here is also not null. And of course, this will be an int. Next field is the username. I'll just leave the varchar the same here. And then full name. And then finally, entry date. And this will be a date time. So like I said, this is exactly like the previous project that we worked on with MongoDB. I'm creating the same exact tables. I'm going to apply this. So if I click on this down arrow right here, you'll see that I have the users table. And I want to create one more table. So create table. And this one is called tweets. Same thing, we need an ID. And it is a primary key with auto incrementation. And then we have tweet. And finally, a user ID. And this is an integer. Because with this user ID, I'm going to link it back to the users table so I can find out who tweeted this. So I'm going to apply this. Everything executed nicely. And here we go. I have my users table and tweets table. Okay, so let's minimize this right now because I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code here. You'll notice that I have back end and front end right here. And I'm going to open the package.json right here because we no longer need Mongoose here. I'm going to remove this. Go ahead and save that. And then I want you to do this. Close this up. Go down here to the terminal and let's cd into our backend. Because after you've downloaded this from my GitHub, you'll need to run npm install so that it can grab all of the packages for you. And then after you've done that, go ahead and cd out of it and then cd into the front end and do the exact same thing, npm install. I've already installed everything. Starting with the back end here, open up index. And so I'm going to remove the Mongoose right here because I no longer need it. And I'm going to remove this Mongoose database connection right here. And I need to create a new MySQL connection. But I'm not going to create the connection in here. I'm going to create a new folder here called config. And inside of config, I'm going to create a new file called db.js. So one thing I didn't do yet is to npm my MySQL as a dependency. So let's do that. Npm install MySQL. And let's check it out. Right here, I have MySQL 2.18.1. So now let's include this file, const MySQL equals require MySQL. And then I'm also going to require the .environment file. Save that because we're going to create some parameters in here so that we can include into here. And now I'm going to create a connection, but I'll show you which one I'm using. I'm using a pool. And I'll show you why. It's called mysql.createPool. Close that up. And here is the thing here. You will notice that a lot of people would use something called, they will do a const connection equals mysql.createConnection right here. A lot of people will use this, but they will end up running into errors later on when they're creating a connection and ending the connections. And so I've learned this through creating projects that I've ran into too many errors. So I moved over to using a pool now. And it's a lot better, so I really suggest using a pool. If you watch other tutorials using the MySQL create connection, it will also have a con.connect like that. and it'll look like this, where you can do a query and then you'll always have to end it. And then a lot of people don't know when to end the connection, and that's where the problem comes in. So I really suggest using a pool. I'll comment that out. And this is what the pool does. I can do a connection limit and give it 10 connections. We need a host, and I'll enter in the host and user information after this. Let's just set this up. We need a password, and then there's also a database. And finally, let's do a module.exports equals pool. All right, so now let's enter in our missing host, user, password, and database connection. And where I'm going to enter that in is through the environment file. So let's open this .env file. And instead of this DB URI that we were using with Mongo database, I'm now going to create a DB host. And this is a local host, a DB user, and this is a root. Remember, our username is just root. DB password, I'll just call it pass. And I left this empty. Now, this is where if you created a password for your database, enter that in here. And then I have my DB database. And what database am I selecting? That's correct, the Node Twitter clone that we just set up using the Workbench. So I'm going to save this. I also have this right here, port 4000. So go ahead and keep all that because we're still using port 4000 for this. And now I just have to call this. So let's call our parameters here, process.env.dbHost. And I can just copy this and paste it here because it's going to be like this for user and then password. And this is database. And that is our pool connection. Go ahead and save that. Close this up. And then we're back to the index.js file. Now I'm going to include this into this file here, const pool equals require. And then let's look it up inside config db.js. And then now I can use this pool to create a connection. So I'll say pool.getConnection error connection. Here is our connection that's being passed through. So if there is an error, I'm going to throw the error. And let me do a simple query right here. I'll say const query equals, and I will do a simple insert into our users database, similar to our MongoDB tutorial previously. Insert into, we have a table called users, username, full name, entry date, values, and right here I suggest using this. I'm going to pass through the values through here, and this will help with MySQL injections and other problems. I'm using this right here, and it will automatically generate the date and time for me. Now let's set up the connection.query, and I'm going to use that query string right here. I'm going to pass through that query, and now this is where I can enter in the username and full name through these values right here that I entered with a question mark. So I can say like this for the username, Coder Kai, and then full name, just give my full name here, Coder Kai, and that's how you pass it through. Now it's going to give either an error or result, arrow function. Now here's another thing that I like to do. I don't like to manually enter things in like this, so I like to create variables for them. So let's do a const user equals, and this is where I'm going to put Coder Kai, right? So now this is going to be called user, and this is where Coder Kai goes. Same thing, const full name, Coder Kai, and now I can pass through full name through here. So once this query executes, you can do a connection.release. So remember what I said about the connection.end that was giving people problems. So with this get connection pool, it will create it for you, you release it, and everything is good to go. Now if there was an error, I'll just simply throw the error, and then I'll just console log this to let myself know the result. And that is it for this connection. I'll run this and it should insert this into our new database table inside users. So let's run this right now. So here we go. I'm going to run npm run server, and I'm inside of my backend folder while doing this. Okay, so I forgot to remove Mongoose from my other modules in here, so I'm going to do that right now, and then we'll rerun it because I have the schemas here. I have some of these modules with the schemas, so I can just remove these now. I'm going to remove the modules, delete this, and then inside my handler here I can remove this part, the schemas. No longer need that, and I might as well comment these all out right now because it is using those schemas, and we'll get back to updating this with the MySQL in a minute. I'm going to save the handler. So let's rerun this now. npm run server. And there you go. You see that I've successfully inserted. The server is running on port 4000, and I returned back the results. See, insert ID, and it inserted 1, it affected rows 1. So everything is good. I can control C to end that server now. And so we go back to the workbench. So here I can say select star from, now I have to call node Twitter clone dot users. Run that. And here we go. Here's the entry that I just made. Coder Kai, username, full name, and the entry date. And so I want to do one more entry into this so I can complete my project. So I'm going to paste my insert right here. Insert into users, username, full name, entry date. And I'll give it values of Eagle Fang for the username and Sensei Johnny for the full name. And then same thing for the date right here as now. And also I need to modify this right here and say node Twitter clone so that it knows which schema to use. And that looks good. So let's execute this statement. And now I can say select star from node Twitter clone dot users, and I can highlight this and only execute that highlighted by clicking on that. And there we go. We have 2 users entries in here. So everything looks good. Let's minimize this and go back to our project here. So far, I've showed you how to make a MySQL connection using the pool, how to insert and do some queries. So now I'm going to go to my handler over here, and we're going to do some queries so that we can retrieve those tweets. So first thing we need to do is include the pool. We're going to require that inside of config here and db.js. And inside the tweets here, I'm going to remove all of this code that was used for the Mongo database in our previous project. We don't no longer need that. And now I can call the pool. I can say pool.getConnection right there. Error and connection, arrow function. Now if there's an error, just throw the error. And I'm going to try this right here. Let's do a query string. And let's make our query selection. I'm going to select u.username, u.fullname, because this is from the users table. t.tweet, this is from the tweet table. From users as u, inner join, tweets as t, on u.id equals t.user.id. So you remember from our tweets table, we have a column called user ID that I matched to the users table so that I can grab the username and full name. And then I'm also selecting from the tweets table. So that's all I'm doing. I'm joining 2 tables and getting everything. And then I'll do a connection.query on that and pass through our query string. And it should return an error or result. And then once again, I'm going to release it. Connection.release. If error, throw error. Otherwise, we're going to send a response. And I need to stringify this. So json.stringify the result. And the results from this query. So this should query everything, return the result, and I'm going to change it into a JSON string and display it onto the page so that we can use, because this is in the back end. And if you remember, we have the front end that will grab this and display it for us nicely. So we'll move on to that later on. But next thing I need to do is we're going to modify this add tweet here. So I'm removing everything from the previous project. Now, if you remember from add tweet, we have a form that we can submit a tweet. And so let's get that form input called user tweet, right? And request it. Tweet input. And once again, I need to define a user ID. And if you remember, ID1 equals coder Kai. Because we've already entered in these two users here, 2 equals Eaglefang. That's already inside of our database. And to cover this again, like I explained previously, if we have a fully working application, I would already be logged in through my username, and I would already be provided with a user ID. But since I didn't create any logins so that I can get my user ID, I'm just defining it here so that I can grab it myself. So let's do a pool.getConnection, error connection. If error, throw error. And let's do another query string here. And so we're going to do an insert now. Insert into tweets. You notice that I didn't have to do a Node Twitter clone on this, because running the commands through this, it already knows my database because I selected through the environment here. It already knows that I'm using this. And if you notice through our Workbench, we had to define it because we have 2 schemas in here and it didn't know which one to select. So that's the difference. That's why I kept on typing it like this in here. So keep that in mind. We're going to insert into tweets, and I'm inserting a tweet in the user ID. Values question mark, and let's do a connection query on this. Pass through the query, and I'm going to pass through a user tweet and the user ID that we defined already up here. Here's the user tweet and ID for these values right here. And then it should return an error and result. And then we can release this connection again. So always remember to release the connection. If error, throw error. And I'll just console log and say tweet added. So after it runs this query right here to insert, I want to do a response.redirect to the tweets page. And then I'll just end it. So even if this doesn't execute correctly, it will always just redirect myself to the tweets page. And I forgot to also do a catch right here. We're going to catch any errors. And I'll just do a console log if there's an error on this. Console log the error. And then response.end on this. And so, yeah, this is everything that we need for the handler to display a tweet, to do a post on a tweet that we need. So let's now run over to the front end to complete this project. I'm going to minimize all this right here, go to the front end, and inside of source, we have components and the tweet.js. So this is the only file that I'm going to modify because this is our main page that shows the tweet. It has our form right here that we created in the previous one with an action of post. It goes to the add tweet. And then of course the tweet input. This is where we enter in the tweet, and then the tweet button. So we submit it there. And then down here in the items.map, we're iterating through the items right here that we grab from our tweets. And this is going to change a little bit because we no longer need this user right here. I can remove that because it's only now item.fullname and item.username and item.tweet. And everything looks good on this now. So let's start up our server here, but before I do, I want to go to the back end inside of index.js, and I'm going to remove this connection here because I'm no longer using this. It's only being used in the handler. So I'm going to remove, comment that out. I'm inside of my backend, so I'm going to do npm run server. The server has started on that. I'm going to create a new terminal here and cd into the front end and say npm start. Here we are. It started up. Now I'll go to my tweets page, but we have nothing in here. So I will enter in a tweet right now. Node with MySQL. And there you go. I sent a tweet called Node with MySQL. And you notice that it sent it as Coder Kai because that's who I told it to send it as. But I can change it to the other Eagle thing. If I go back to the project and I go to the handler, and down here I just changed the user ID. So let's pretend I logged in through another user. Now whenever I submit a tweet or add a tweet here, it's going to add it as the Eagle thing user. I'll save that. And going back here, I'll go to tweets again. Now let's submit another one. It works. And you'll see right there, Sensei Johnny from Eagle Fang, it works. And so you see how easy it is to use MySQL with Node and Workbench so that you can see your tables and schemas that you're setting up, and then programming it into Node here by setting up a connection right here, and then also by using the pool to query, insert, and do whatever you need to do. I feel like this is a little bit easier than the MongoDB if you're really used to SQL queries. So yeah, I hope this project helped you out whether you're deciding to do a MongoDB or a MySQL. Now you're covered in all bases. When you're applying for companies out there that's using different databases, now you're covered with both MySQL and MongoDB. I hope you enjoyed this. Please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more. And I will see you in the next video. Coder Kai out. Thank you.